Thank you for tuning into Hinton Cast. This is Maggie Block. I am the deputy publisher at Hinton Publishing. We are so excited to be sharing these conversations that we had with authors in the Pacific Northwest who belong to communities that have historically been under-invited to share their work, aka the kind of author we publish. Now, I need to let you know that these are conversations that we had in early 2024. There's a number of reasons why we weren't able to get these podcasts out earlier. The number one being that we're a really small team who are trying to accomplish a heck of a lot. That said, these conversations are evergreen. Don't mind us if you hear us talking about something in the present tense that you now know is in the past. The knowledge, the insight, the brilliance of these conversations are going to resonate with you today. And hey, better late than never, right? Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic back in time to Marcus and myself. Thank you.
Hello, lovers of literature, and welcome to the Hinton Cast, where we speak with storytellers creatively disrupting the publishing world. I am Hinton publisher Marcus Harrison Green, joined by the storm to my Wolverine, the peanut butter to my jelly, my deputy publisher of Hinton, Maggie Block. Maggie, how are you doing today?
I have always wanted to be Storm, so I'm really honored right now. I'm doing well, and I am so excited to be talking to the incredible Nisi Shawl, an incredible Afrofuturist writer, a local gem, and I'm really grateful that we did this project because I had not read her books yet, and they're so phenomenal, and I am now want to shout them from the rooftops and make sure everybody knows to go out and read Nisi Shawl.
Yes, this is some. It is like a secular religion. Nisi's books are,
Yes.
and I am definitely praying to the altar. But let me go ahead and give Nisi's wonderful bio. So for people who do not know, although everybody should, but just in case you do not, Nisi Shawl is a writer, editor, and journalist. They are best known as an author of science fiction and fantasy short stories who writes and teaches about how fantastic fiction might reflect real-world diversity of gender, sexual orientation, race, colonialism, physical ability, age, and other socio-cultural factors. Nisi, it is such a great honor and pleasure to be speaking with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing swell, and I'm so glad to be talking with y'all.
Yay, thank you. So we are going to be talking about Kinning, which is book 2 of Everfair. Do you mind giving our audience just a quick primer for what is this world of Everfair that you have created?
So, Everfair, I guess you could call it an alternate history. My point of departure from our history is in the late 19th century, instead of founding the London School of Economics, a bunch of European socialists, they were the Fabian socialists. So in our timeline, they founded the London School of Economics. In my novel, they used their funds to purchase a whole bunch of land from King Leopold of Belgium, who just sort of asserted that he owned like 1/3 of Africa almost. I mean, he just like, oh, everything around the Congo, all this stuff that's in this watershed, that's mine. So these people bought it, and they got together with a bunch of African American missionaries to do this sort of socialist colony, a utopian settlement. The people who were living there are they're making themselves scarce because they don't want to become slaves to Leopold, who was doing nefarious things like chopping off people's hands wholesale. Um, so they're kind of scarce, but then they come out and they also become involved in this utopian project. So that's Everfair, and then Kinning takes up where Everfair ends, and there's a whole bunch of anti-colonialism going on all around the world, and some of these characters from Everfair are trying to help it out. There's also a struggle for succession between some of the indigenous people of Everfair, of the Congo region. There's a Princess Mwadi and there's Prince Ilunga. They're both children of the king of that region, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to rule it. No, I'm going to rule it." And that's part of what's going on in Kinning.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of historical fiction, and so I am always curious about what actual events authors put into the narrative of their stories, and so I'm wondering with Everfair, what real pieces of history did you weave into the story?
So I did it more on the basis of characters. Um, King Leopold, who actually does not show up on the page, I'm very proud that I kept him off the page there,
Yes.
um, was real. One of his spies that Christopher Thornhill, I think his name is, he was real. And then King Wenda was based on King Waziri. Um, Lisette is based on Colette. And then as far as events, well, there was World War One, and there was an influenza epidemic, which begins at the end of Everfair and is really important as far as the plot of Kinning. Yeah, influenza.
It's true. Yeah. And no one will see what's coming, and I'm not going to tell them. So I loved, again, genuinely loved both of your books so much. And one of the things that I found so compelling is that all of the characters are just so complicated. I would have a really hard time with like a character that would seem like a complete womanizer and be like, oh, but he's actually smart and has good political ideas. Or a character that had really lovely ideas about democracy would have these really sort of like horrific like racist ideology. And I would love to just dive deeper into that. Why is it important to you as an author to have such challenging characters in your work?
Well, I don't know that I think of them as challenging so much
Mm.
as realistic. I mean, nobody is the villain of their own story. So, these people, they have their own narratives of what's going on. You mentioned the womanizer who is also has really sound political ideas. Yeah, that was based on George Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells, who
Wow.
both of whom were very forward thinkers, but also they were like, "Yeah, I'm gonna smack this."
Are those the direct
Yeah.
quotes from those authors?
No, that's a bit of a translation there. But yeah, they nobody is just, you know, good or just evil. Um, well, I may make a couple of exceptions in current days, but mostly we're not. And I think that's something that I learned from reading the stuff that Octavia Butler wrote, because her characters also are very complicated. And the situations they find themselves in are very nuanced. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to ask you, for you, why was it important to tell a revised history of Africa that included white people and their racist ideas? Why not just tell a story of Africa that was purely from the perspective of folks from African descent?
But they're there. I mean, there are tons of people like there are a ton of South Asian people in East Africa. Um, I just think that the world is not as divided as some versions of the truth would have us believe.
Mm.
You talk about history, there were trade routes between Cornwall and Egypt that
Wow.
in prehistoric times. And they have trade goods that made their way from Egypt, glass beads that made their way from Egypt up to Britain. And then I think that this is true of the whole world. So it was important to me to show that these things were were part of the background. Um, Going back to Everfair, there's one thing that I found when I was researching was that Leopold asked, uh, asked, Leopold made a bunch of Macau Chinese railway workers build a railroad between the navigable stretches of the Upper Congo and the bay that the waterfalls emptied into. Which, of course, they were doing it under horrific conditions,
Right.
and yeah, it was basically slave labor again. So some of them said, well, forget this. Which way is east? And they headed off into the bush. And so there were Chinese people in the 19th century in the Congo, and they did not get to Macau from from the Congo, but they did, like, settle down, and there are towns and villages in the Congo that have this remainder of Chinese customs and food attitudes and language because these people came through there and settled there even. So yeah, they're there.
Right.
That's awesome. I what so are you just a history nerd? Like how did you come about like you were clearly a wealth of knowledge. How did you begin to learn all of these incredible histories of like Africa and ancient humanity?
So the thing that I first got clued in with, it was a book by Leo, no, what's his name? Adam Hochschild, King Leopold's Ghost.
Mm.
And that is a very popular book, almost like popular science, but popular history about the whole humanitarian crisis. So that was the gateway drug, sort of, as they say, to studying this stuff. And then I challenged myself to write, so then I had to do some research, which included films, which included books, which included talking to people, which included Wikipedia, music, whatever I could find.
How many hours would you say that you spent just in the research alone?
I did not stop and clock that. I'm one of those people who research as we go.
Mm.
Sure.
So, yeah, so I didn't like say, oh, time to stop researching, time to start writing. I just like there, I would be in the middle of a sentence and I would have to look something up. So I
Gotcha.
can't tell you. Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, definitely it seemed extensive, nonetheless. That being said, I was wondering, was Everfair always meant to be the first in the series, or what called you back to write the Kenning?
What called me back to write Kinning? So I had thought about, what would happen next. And I don't know if you've ever um, tried to write alternate history yourself, but you start out with this like really, really slight divergence from the path, and then the differences like pile up. You're going maybe 5 degrees from the route that history supposedly has taken for us.
Hmm.
And then, but that 5 degrees, you keep going in that direction, and it gets stranger and stranger. So I did want to see what came next. And I had some ideas. Um, I will not necessarily want to get into this with you, but I was told that there would be no sequel
Oh,
by my publisher. And then And then the movie Black Panther hit, and they're all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, wait, no, actually, we could use a sequel." So,
R2, I'm sure they. I,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
How lucky for them that they already had Everfair on their roster. Wow.
yeah.
Well, I'm very thank another thing to be grateful for. Thank you,
Very
Black
much.
Panther. Um, so let's dive into Kinning. It just came out. I believe you had your launch party as we were recording this past Friday. Congratulations.
Yes.
Um, so one of the things that was surprising to me being dropped into Kinning is we're so far away from Everfair at the very beginning, and we spend all this time with these characters that one of whom I feel like I barely met in Everfair, and I'm curious about why you wanted to drop us there and with those characters.
Well, partly it was because I was like, I am not doing Wakanda 2. Uh, it was really me being stubborn and perverse, I guess you could say. But also the idea that Tink, who is one of the four main characters, was someone that I had the least connection with. The one I had the most connection with in Everfair, by the way, is Lisette.
I thought so.
Um, yeah,
I
yeah.
love
Um,
her.
yeah, yeah, she and I so much alike, right? But anyway, but Tink not so much. So me being difficult and enjoying a challenge, I wanted to drill down deep into that stance in the world, how
Mhm.
he addresses the world. And then hmm, his sister, I wanted to do something with love and relationships that were not uh, usual heterosexual romance. So I wanted to do something with brothers and sisters. And Tink has a sister named Bilung. So there's that one. And then the succession between Mwadi and Ilunga, their brother and sister also.
Wow.
So that's why I chose them and why I chose to be so far away. Like I said, this is not Wakanda 2.
Not at all. Not at all. Uh, well, I want to talk to you about the introduction of Kenning. You kind of break the fourth wall there a little bit in the terms of you speak directly to the readers, and you talk to us about the points of view from which you are telling the story and how the story is affecting us. So, why did you choose to make that decision?
Well, perhaps I was imitating a little bit Gloria Naylor, right? That's nobody expects that. But uh, that voice that breaks the fourth wall belongs to a character that develops throughout Kinning. Um,
Mm.
and I can't say too much more
Right.
without spoiling things, but that is the voice of a particular entity,
Mm. That
an all-knowing entity.
if that doesn't make people buy the book, then I don't know what else will. So anyway.
um, I again, one of the things that I found very realistic and complicated about both books is the characters who are all striving for equality, perhaps even labeling it as socialism. Um, that led to the founding of Everfair and the continued attempt to govern and we call it the American experiment, like the Everfair experiment. How do you think that those themes continue in Kinning? How do you think that they like are in parallel to the struggles that the characters in Everfair found, and how do you think they either go bigger, go farther, or completely change course in Kinning?
I was talking with Tom Foster about this. I should say Dr. Foster. He's a professor at University of Washington. So the struggle for equality gets both larger and smaller. It works on a larger scale as we become aware of movements in India and Malaysia and all over the world, really, that are about uh, they're about trying to make people free of a colonial oppression, and trying to make equality a real and a concrete plan of action. So so that is it as sort of enlarged. And then, okay, so I have to explain that a lot of what's going on in Kinning is Tink and Bilung are spreading the spores of a fungus that makes you form small groups called cores, um, with like three to five, well, 2 to 5 other people. And within those little groups, there needs to be some sort of equality, some sort of equity, at least in terms of their power. At one point, Bilung thinks about, should I include this person in that core? No, they used to be a servant to another person in the core, and that dynamic might mess up the formation of the core. So yeah, on a smaller and more personal level, there's also the struggle for getting things to to uh to be equal.
Yeah, I want to ask you. I'm a fan of the Hunger Games series, and one of the things that one of the biggest criticisms from that series is that it's so hard in general just to write about revolutionary ideas and to write about revolution without it descending into a trope of the individual that we've come to know as sort of something that is paramount to Western style storytelling. And
Yeah.
so, amongst the many things I want to commend you on is being able to write about revolutionary ideas in such a wonderful way. And so, I want to ask you, in terms of writing about those ideas, like what goes into that? Like, what is your approach to writing about revolutionary ideas that it so that it doesn't descend sort of into, the kind of Western style or Western canon of that individual trope that we've come to know and loathe, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really glad to hear you say that I was able to do that. Um, it seems to me that the most powerful revolution involves connection.
Mm,
I
Yes.
actually was talking about violence and connection
mm,
and revolution with a friend of mine. It's not that I'm, you know, completely opposed to violence. I think that, it can sometimes be very effectively applied. But who has more violence, me or some general in the Pentagon?
mm,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
It's a very practical thing to say that revolution comes from people getting together because there's more people. Um, and I have heard the truism that revolution comes out of the barrel of a gun,
Mm-hmm,
right? Um, I think that is of limited truth
mm,
because who has more guns?
right.
Absolutely.
Right. Mm,
That's all. To talk again very briefly about spirit medicine, it's a driving force in Kinning. I was wondering if you would want to tell us either what it is without spoiling, or where the idea came from, or what it represents
Uh,
uh, to you.
I could tell you so many things about that. Okay, so
Yay!
the spirit medicine is what Tink and Bi Lung are uh, trying to spread around the world as they go on being outside agitators and stirring up revolution. The spirit medicine is what causes you to form cores, gives you empathy, and sort of pumps up a bunch of your sensorium so that you can understand more what people are feeling and what their tendencies are. You can't read their thoughts, but you can get a real good read on what they might do. So the spirit medicine is, first of all, based on a Chinese novel that I never read. It was called New China. It was written in, or published at least, in 1910 by a Chinese anarchist named Lu Xie. And I have not read it because it's not translated into English. And I cannot afford to pay somebody to do that translation. It's a whole novel. But I have read some summaries, and the basic plot is someone falls asleep and wakes up in China 50 years after they fell asleep, and everything has changed. There's been this whole socialist revolution, and there are parks and free medicine, and it's all groovy. Um, and the reason that the revolution succeeded was because of this stuff called spirit medicine.
Oh.
So yeah, I was like, give me some of that. Okay,
Absolutely.
let's get that going.
I'll have what they're having. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's gonna have what they're having. So yeah, the idea came from that, and then I did some more investigation into things like the wood wide web, which is how in forests plants, trees, even of different species, communicate through
Yeah.
their root systems and through the fungal coatings on their root systems. Yeah. So, and then I was like, okay, so an empathogen, are there actual empathogens, that is, uh, substances that generate empathy? Are there actual empathogens that I can extrapolate from? And it's basically like XTC, ecstasy, uh, what is it? I don't know how to say this. Ayahuasca?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think. But yeah, there are a bunch of like recreational drugs basically that are supposed to pump up your empathy. So I studied those too. I didn't take them, but I studied them.
You can read about them.
Yeah.
Exactly, or talk to people about them.
Interview
Yeah.
about them.
Very true.
Absolutely.
Very true. So I want to ask you, there are a ton of names of places in the book that I hadn't actually heard of before. And so I'm wondering, are all the names of places in your stories, are they actual historical names of places?
Yeah, some of them are places that are still going today. There's like Kisangani in the Congo, the DRC. Um, yeah, what there's that city in the desert. Okay, I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna spoil stuff. But yes, the answer is yes.
well, I guess what I really wanted to get at is like, why did you know, was there anything symbolic about why you chose the places that you chose? Whether you had visited before, whether you just had, an emotional attachment, it didn't, or was it just, hey, this sounds like a great name, and I'll go with it.
Oh no, it was there were so many places, like I think a couple of chapters take place on Sri Lanka, on Ceylon as it was known then. But that was a mystery to me why we were spending so much time there actually, until I looked. I do altars when I write. I set up
Oh.
altars, and I looked and there was a picture of Sri Lanka on my altar. I was like, oh, that's why we're like not getting off this island. Um, and I looked for places where people of different backgrounds would have met. Like there's a Malaysian Muslim woman. Where would she have landed on Ceylon, Trincomalee? And then if someone went around the whole island, what is the urban center that they would wind up at? So I was not going so much for the significance of names and what they meant as on the ground, what did that place look like? What went on there and who came there?
Got you. Got you.
Awesome. When cores get formed, they need to tell a story together, and one of the cores that gets formed, the story that they share together is the sleeper. And as we are told about that story, there's a character called Mayweather Cindy, which makes me think of Janelle Monáe's alter ego. And I would love to know, is that your reference? Am I missing the original reference?
No, that's it. That's it. I wanted to invoke Janelle
Okay.
Monáe. I was like, this is someone who is doing important stuff with getting the science fiction out to the masses, and I wanted to do that tribute to her. You got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
No,
Yeah.
love her.
I saw Janelle when they came here to Seattle, and it was an amazing show. So. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked their book. Was it Dirty? No, that was the name of their.
Yes. Yeah, that was I think it was Dirty Computer and Other Stories.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then she also did the emotion picture, and I loved it. Yeah, I completely agree. I think she does such an incredible job of taking science fiction and making it pop culture in all these really fun and dynamic ways. So
Yeah.
I am also a fan.
Absolutely.
I'm proud of myself. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. As you should be. As you should be. Um, so I did want to ask you another question about the cores. For you, why was it important for them to have a shared story? And why was it important to have an animal as a core member?
Okay, those are such different questions.
Right.
I
So,
believe it.
that's
Well, you can
two
take the first
questions,
one
Sam.
first or last one last, whichever you
Yeah,
want to do.
yeah, that's how I'll do it. I believe that stories are important to how we form our identities. As I said earlier, nobody is the villain of their own story.
Mm,
We are the heroes of our own stories, and we're constantly narrating to ourselves, in my opinion,
mhm.
what is going on. We try to impose meaning on the world through the stories that we tell starring ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, so having a shared story means having a shared identity, which I tried and tried and tried to make sure people understood was in addition to your personal personality, you now have this group personality. It's not like obliterating your personality, it's adding depth to it. So that's why that. I have talked to a couple of people who said, no, I don't have any inner story. No, I'm not narrating my story to myself all the time. But most people, I will say, most people agree that that's what they do. They see themselves as stories. There's also a great book by John Crowley called Engine Summer, in which the protagonist, his dream, his goal is to become a story that everyone tells for generations. And I think that would be nice if that happened for me too.
Yeah.
So then, why an animal in the cores? So the cores develop throughout kinning. I'm not going to say too much more except to say that they start out simple and they become more complicated and more self-motivating. Um, so it's only the later cores that include animals. And that is based on my belief that we are related to animals, that animals are part of our community. that they are not separate from humans, that humans are animals and animals are people. There's a Native American, an Indian saying that is popular among many different nations, many different tribes, as they're called. And that is when you're talking about, who you thank for making your life possible, you say, my grandpa Carl and my grandma Emmeline, and you say all my relations, and that includes the non-human relations.
Hmm.
Mm.
So I think that in a true revolution, you have a healthy and intimate relationship with non-human people.
Mm.
I love that.
Yes, I love that too.
All right, we're going to shift a little bit to talking about your craft and how you do the incredible work of writing these incredible books. So once you've identified a new project, what does your writing process look like to make sure that you stay on track and actually meet your deadline? Are you scheduling out time the same time every day, or do you have other rituals to help you in the flow of writing?
Yes, to both of those.
Okay.
I have a calendar, a paper calendar, in which I write down, which projects I'm going to be working on today in order to get them done by a particular deadline. At this point in my career, I am 68 years old, right? I have a pretty good idea of how many words I can create in a day. It's not many. It depends on the project, but it can be anywhere from 200 to 800 words. Now, I know people who can write 6,000 words in a day, no problem. That's not me. So I have to plan, okay, if they want me to do a story for this anthology that's 5,000 words long, that means I need to allow at least 2 weeks to write it, to revise it, and to get it into some sort of shape where they can look at it and then make me make more revisions.
Sure.
And I say this because I don't write on spec anymore. I write on commission, basically. So anytime I have a project, it's already been delineated as far as the theme, the deadline, and the length. So there's that. Um, I also, as I mentioned, put together altars for different things, not necessarily for the smaller projects. Like I recently had to write a, an obituary of my friend Terry Bisson. So I didn't need to put together an altar for that. But for Kinning, I sure did have an altar. And I include candles, scents that are evocative to me, not for Kinning, but for another project that I finished recently. I had a beeswax candle. I had lemon and rosemary oil. I had water. I had honey. All these things that are significant to what I'm trying to bring out in that story. And then I also do a thing these days where I meet with people over Zoom from 1 to 3 and from 3:30 to 5:30. And we talk about craft stuff, who's been sassing us, who's been refusing to go out the door where they're supposed to discover a foundling, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And also, you know, who's I've got a headache, I don't feel like doing much today. Just personal stuff. We talk for like maybe 10, 15 minutes and then we work for 45 minutes. We mute and work. And it's been incredibly effective for me. I used to write totally by myself, but something about having other people who are also in that workspace near me is helpful. It's really helpful. Those are my practices.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, relatedly, I think it's the writer Stephen Pressfield who has a quote where he says, when it comes to writing, writers need to put their ass where their heart wants to be. And we live in this world where, we can be constantly distracted, whether it's our phones, social media, people calling us, and so forth. And so I want to ask you, like, how do you have any special practice in terms of how you stay disciplined, throughout the writing process? Because, I mean, I'm a columnist for the Seattle Times, and I will tell you, like, I'm 5 minutes in and I'm, checking my phone. Maybe it's the ADD or something, but yeah. So how do you stay like fully attuned while you're writing?
I don't. No, because I think that hyper focus works for some people. And it may work very, very well for people at a certain spot on, say, the autism spectrum, or people who have, been brought up with that sort of discipline. But for me, I'm like, checking my email, casting my eyes around. I once was doing a high school visit, and one of the questions from the class was, how do you get yourself to sit down and write? I said, I don't. I get up, I walk around, I pet my cat, because writing is about more than like having your hands on the keyboard.
Mm.
Um, One person I admire, Connie Willis, used to write in 15-minute increments, 15 minutes at a time.
Wow.
This was when she was being a housewife and
Mm.
raising a child, and that was the most time she could get. But she was writing in other ways. She was planning what she would put down when she sat at the keyboard. Um, and I think that sometimes if I just let my mind get busy with something else, my conscious mind, then my unconscious mind will work out the solution that I need.
Mm.
Fortunately, I have no problem going back to it after I've like looked at my email, um, or looked at my blue Skype feed or whatever. Um, because if I had problems getting back to it, then that would not be a winning strategy, would it?
Yeah, yeah. I think you just provided affirmation and relief to like 70% of the writing world there with your answer. So thank you.
No, I love that. I got my bachelor's in playwriting, and I remember my playwriting, like I did it sort of, I would plan things out and really like need to get it done. And he was like, no, you just need to write like when like the characters come to you. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge that like there's so many different ways to write.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
there's as many different ways to write as there are writers. So I agree. I think a lot of writers are going to be so relieved to hear that. And especially like not only have you written so many books, but you've written so many great books, and you can
Yes.
do that without completely changing the way that your brain chemistry works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love that, not everybody needs to be Stephen King and, clock in the 9 to 5 and write 10,000 words a day. So thank you.
Yeah, one thing I'll just add is that I'm often asked what advice I give to writers who are just beginning to write. And my standard advice is try different things, find out what works for you, and expect it to change.
Mm.
I love
Love
that.
that.
Because Octavia Butler, whom I so loved and so admired, said to write every day. And I don't, I can't. There are other things that I need to do in a day. Um, but that worked for her. And that may work for someone listening, but it's not the only way. Um, it's not the only way to get, 2,000 words even. Just find out what does work for you. Try different stuff. And then, as I said, expect it to change.
Nice.
I love that. I love that. Room to be human in the writing process.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. The publishing industry sometimes pressures writers to engage in self-censorship or dull their voice in order to appeal to a quote-unquote universal audience. Have you faced industry pressure? And if so, how have you responded to it?
I have only seen this in a couple of small examples. No one has ever said, Nisi, stop writing about anti-colonialism. But a former editor of mine said in Everfair, why are you talking about this woman kissing this other woman's kitchen?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do either of you know what a kitchen is?
I mean, now I have a guess, but
Yeah, I was inferring what.
Right. So, where I come from, where I was raised up, the kitchen is this very sexually charged area, like right at the nape of your neck, where your hair meets your neck, you know. And it is very much a part of Black culture to be talking about someone's kitchen, and you're not talking about part of their house.
Right.
But the editor did not know that. And so she's like, well, take that out or explain it. And I said, no. I said, people can do things like you were saying, you know, Maggie, you can infer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or not and just be mystified. But the people who know that will just be warmed and supported by the idea that someone is referring to that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So I do want to ask you, like, and this is become a hot topic in the publishing world. But how do you go about approaching writing characters whose identity you don't share? You know, are you relying on research or firsthand experience or sensitivity readers?
I rely on all of those, honestly. And I've gotten some things wrong, you know. But the thing is, and I get into this with writing with the classes in the book, it's very cowardly to just say, I'm not going to try to do that because someone will cancel me for it, or people will pile up on me.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do the research. You need to do whatever it takes to make it as good as you can. And you need to expect that you will learn from other people what you messed up.
Right. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
You know, I'm sorry, but it's not just a question of, like, you know, doing it and say, you know, damn the torpedoes, I'm writing this, because that can lead to actual harm.
Right.
That can lead to harming
Absolutely.
people. But
Absolutely.
you need to try and do it as right as you can.
Yes.
Yeah. And, like, you know, I'm glad that we live in a time where there actually are tools and we even have the terms for things like sensitivity readers. I feel like
Yeah.
there was a very long time. There was a very long time where a lot of people of a similar ethnicity to me were just like, it's fine. Like, I saw a movie in the 80s. Like, I get it. And I'm glad we're living in a time where there is room for communities who are being written about and not written from are able to finally push back and yeah, you know, like, I agree. I think it's very cowardly to be like, oh, well, like, what if they don't? And yeah,
Wow.
but also I think it's great that we have community that has a voice now.
You said
Yes.
people similar to you, Maggie. All this time, I thought you were albino Black. Like, for 10 years, I just did not know. Wow. Okay.
My hair wasn't a tip off. No, at times I've had students who've been like, wait, you're white? And I'm like, that is the greatest compliment that you could ever say to me. Thank you so much. I am, unfortunately, but I
Well,
mean,
there's white and there's white. Okay,
Yes.
like there are some
very
people who
much.
get
Yes.
creative with the spelling to underline. There's people who have, ancestry from a certain part of the world, and then there's people who are just like they they've got baked in privilege.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
No, and like I'm really proud of my family and my heritage. I get when I say things like unfortunately, I'm mostly referring like I'm not ashamed of being white. I'm ashamed of what so many other people who are white do. You know, like the work that they do to try and bury and erase everyone else. That's what makes me be like, ooh, unfortunately. And yeah, and if they didn't act like that, I don't think
Yeah.
I wouldn't have any reason to be frustrated or upset.
No, I've taken Maggie to a couple of cookouts with no problem. So, it's been fine.
Yes.
It's been fine. Anyway, anyhow,
Okay. One more question about craft. There are much easier ways to make a living. So what is it about the craft of writing that makes you keep coming back to it?
It's the power.
I love that. Say
It's the
more.
power. No, when I was little, and I still remember this vividly, when I was little, people would ask me what I wanted to be, and I always said a magician. And they're like, "Oh, you want to be up on stage and pull rabbits from hats?" No, I want to actually do real magic. This is as close as I have ever gotten. I create these worlds. I put these images in people's minds. Of course, they don't always get the image that I'm trying to give them, and sometimes they get some other images that I wasn't aware of at all. But I, I, I think this is as close as I have ever gotten so far to being a magician.
well, better than David Copperfield, I must say. You know, you are great.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
We do want to finish up as we do every episode with our apropos of nothing question, which is unrelated to anything that we've talked about. Although I will say, being that you are one of the greatest living science fiction / fantasy writers today, I think this is somewhat relevant. But I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Along with sports, it's the thing that I'm allowed to connect with my father about in an intimate way. And recently, I came across George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, and he was talking about the character of Darth Vader. And he said, Darth Vader is not a villain; he's a victim. And what you said earlier about every character having sort of their own narrative in their head, and so I was wondering, is Darth Vader a victim and not a villain? I mean, the dude literally blew up an entire world. He's killed children. He cuts off his own son's hand. His hand.
That is so significant, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I pose that question to you: is he a villain or a victim or something more?
Oh, well, in the way that I write, in the way that I choose to read, he's both. I mean, there's no reason you can't be both. Maybe not admitting to yourself that you're a villain is part of being a villain.
Hmm. Hmm.
So and maybe clinging to victimhood is part of the burden of being a victim.
Mm.
Ooh.
Mm. I'm going to bring that to my father later today, I must say. So, well, Nisi, Shawl, this was just such a privilege to be able to speak with you today. And just thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for just sharing so much wisdom with us. This conversation was just rich with wisdom and positivity. And I know that our listeners were certainly privileged to hear you today.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I would just like to encourage our listeners to go out and buy Everfair, buy Kenning. Those are not the only books that you have ever published. I will put a whole list in our show notes.
Absolutely.
We are just so lucky to have you here in Seattle. We're so grateful that you were able to talk to us today and support one of the greatest living
Yes.
sci-fi and fantasy writers right now by all of Nisi Shawl's books.
Yes. You are one of the GOATs, Nisi, one of the greatest of all time.
I
Just
agree.
just to make sure that we got the
Thank
acronym
you.
correct.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Keep doing the work. That's all I got to say to you two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to Hinton Cast. This is all made possible by Hinton Publishing. If you would like to support the work that we do, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. If you go to hintonpublishing.com/support-hinton, you will see the many different tiers of support that you can sign up for. And no matter what your budget is, you can choose something that you will not miss at the end of the month. We want to thank Ben Hunter for this beautiful intro and outro music that we use. We want to thank Michael B. Main for recording the gorgeous audio of our conversation today. And we want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again at our next episode.